fact that occult circles even exist till this day should alarm you. Those same people who are practicing this occult magic within society to rule the world, to literally rule the world, are reading these same texts that I'm about to talk to you about. We're going to be focusing on a peculiar form of creation today. That's the homunculus, and the homunculus comes from a Latin miniature human. This is an Aristotelian thought, and this is what inspired all these alchemists. I want to brace the listeners for a lot of the things I'm about to say, because it does get really weird.
Yo, what up? It's DoeNut, and we got a special guest. We got the One-on-One podcast.
So, dude, thank you for having me, man.
We recently just met each other on My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, Illuminati Confirmed, but that was your podcast, right?
It's all three of ours podcasts, so it's a project we all do together. It's fun.
It's fantastic. Your guys' show is amazing. Mystic Mark is amazing. My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. So homunculus, this is something we're going to talk about.
I have the history from the very first mention of the homunculus until the 16th century, which what you pulled up there was the Paracelsian version, the father of toxicology. And the dose makes the poison. And he was a weird guy. Back then, you got to understand, science was still new. They were learning about everything, about nature, about the fabric of reality, about everything. And religion ruled a majority of history. It was all superstition, and religion was at the core at all these things. So it's, God creates life. Nobody else can do that. Well, you have alchemy, which is the sacred chemistry. The homunculus is a byproduct of alchemy. So I want to start off with this quote by Stephen Hawking. I think computer viruses should count as life. I think it says something about human nature, that the only form of life we created so far is purely destructive. We've created life in our own image. All throughout these stories of creation, you have the creation of man through a magical process, either involving dust or clay. And the story of the Anunnaki, what is man? A genetically born being, that they use one of the Anunnaki wombs in order to create this slave, right? The slave that was supposed to help mine for gold. In the story of Genesis, the Lord God formed the man from dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. In Greek cosmology, Prometheus, right, shaped man out of mud, and Athena breathed life into his clay figure. So throughout all of history, we have, and Prometheus is the one that gave man fire, and he was outcasted by the Titans. And it
seems like the Illuminati loved Prometheus, or at least the story of it.
Well, he's the light bringer. He's Lucifer. He's the illuminator. He's the one that gives the forbidden knowledge, the forbidden fruit to man that they weren't supposed to have since the very beginning. And he is forever tormented for eternity, where he is to be chained up, and I think it's a vulture and eagles to eat his liver every single day. It regenerates every single day. With all this said, right, the ultimate power that God has is the ability to create life from nothing. That's, what God giveth, God taketh. And man has always tried, but he always falls short. Something's always not right. And I've talked about this with the uncanny valley, with AI and robotics and all these things that sprout from that. Okay, I see that. Yeah, there you go. They formed it out of clay, and then Athena, she breathed life into it. And you see that in the Genesis story with Adam. In the Talmud, Adam was a golem. And we'll get into that. Nowadays, we have what's called CRISPR technology, where you're able to quote unquote edit or even clone DNA. And I didn't know that the first human clone was created in November of 1998. But after 12 days, they quote unquote destroyed the embryo. So they claim, right? And it was half man, half cow. And keep the cow in mind, because this subject, I think we're going to piss off two crowds of people. We're going to piss off today, three. We're going to piss off women, because these guys back then were misogynist, and some of the aspects you're going to see is like, wait, what? That's kind of seeing women in a bad light. But back then, again, these guys were products of their time. We have to understand that. I am simply a researcher bringing this information to light.
I don't think anybody's going to be upset. Like we're searching truth. We're learning knowledge. We're uncovering the occult. Yeah, no, I don't think anybody will be upset at all.
It's going to get weird today, bro. I just want to brace you for that. It's
Bro,
going to get...
I'm so excited, dude. I got no sleep. I've been up, bro. I've been up since 10 p.m. my time.
Jeez, dude.
And I've just been like, homunculus. I can't wait.
It's in your dream. So these people in 98, they created a half man, half cow embryo, and they supposedly killed it after 12 days. And I also want to note that cloning is illegal in a lot of countries. It's actually an illegal practice, not because it can't be done, but because it can be done. In the Bible, God would forbid man from mixing certain mixtures, right? You couldn't mix certain herbs and certain things within the Bible. So that was prohibited. So that relates to necromancy and all these other, there you go, by advanced cell technology. I did not know this, bro.
Dude, I didn't know this either. And I made a clone documentary and I didn't even uncover this. I went into Dolly, the sheep, and how cloning is legal here. FDA approved. We're allowed to eat cloned meat. They don't have to tell us that we're eating cloned meat. FDA. George Bush came out, said he was going to end the cloning program after Bill Clinton told the world that they're moving it to the private sector, but the government won't do it, but the private sector would.
I want to make it clear that the things that we're going to be talking about today, because you talk a lot about the Illuminati and the elites and the people who they practice the occult. The United States was founded on occult roots. The people that were involved in the creation, this homunculus of a country, were part of secret societies. You could say they were Rosicrucians. You could say they were Freemasons. They were part of occult circles. And the fact that occult circles even exist till this day should alarm you. Those same people who are practicing this occult magic within society to rule the world, to literally rule the world, are reading these same texts that I'm about to talk to you about and that I'm about to present to you.
Bro,
they are using this same magic in order to, like I said, there are various things that I found very interesting. There's how to make armies and how to project giants in the sky today, bro. There's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to be getting into. So,
well, like just to add on top of what you're saying, when we were going through the slides of Paracelsus, this statue of him is in Bavaria, where the Illuminati was founded. The whole story of Frankenstein, too, started in where the Illuminati was founded. And it is about it's alive. It's about what we're talking about.
It's an artificial man. I believe it's part of the transhumanistic agenda, where Frankenstein is a little bit different than a homunculus. And we can get into that, dude. And we're going to get into some, like I said, heretical ideas. So don't shoot the messenger. This is only information that I am relaying. So the ultimate taboo of man is to usurp God, to take God's position. And this could be traced back to the story of creation when Eve goes against God's command. And I'm coming from a Christian standpoint. I was born and raised Pentecostal Christian. I no longer practice Christianity, but I do believe that there is a God. I do believe that there is a source. So I just want to make that clear. So I'm coming at this when I make certain references, I'm coming at from a Christian point of view. So I'm talking about the story of creation, the book of Genesis, where Eve eats the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and she goes against the word of God and chooses to disobey it. And the rest is history. They are aborted from the Garden of Eden, and man and woman is forever cursed after that. We're going to be focusing on a peculiar form of creation today, or abomination, depending on who you ask, because back then these guys were very proud about these creations, and that's the homunculus. And the homunculus comes from a Latin term that means little man or miniature human, and it is a representation of a small human being, originally depicted as a small statue made of clay. And what you've pulled up there, you see that picture with the man with the big hands and the big mouth? That's called the cortical homunculus, and it is a distorted representation of the human body based on the neurological map of the areas and proportions of the human brain dedicated to processing motor functions. So it shows you by size how much the body uses certain things in the brain. And
It
that's
looks
what,
like it's down to a science, bro. That kind of scares me that what this is real because they got it down.
so this is a scientific interpretation of a homunculus, and they call that the cortex man, and it illustrates the concept of representation, the body lying within the brain. So what the brain controls and how much of it controls is the size of its appendages.
Wow.
That's what you're seeing there. And in psychology, this is really interesting because we start to see, I'm going to paint a picture for everybody of how these ideas evolve throughout time. In psychology, we have something known as the homunculus argument. And this argument comes from a theory dubbed the Cartesian theater. And people know Rene Descartes, but it has nothing to do with Rene Descartes and Cartesian philosophy. And what essentially it states is, what are we seeing? What is interpreting what we're seeing? So back then they thought that it was a little homunculus inside of our brain watching a screen of everything that we're seeing.
Just like in Men in Black.
Yeah, exactly. Just like in Men in Black. So it's called the homunculus argument, but it is a phenomenon that cancels itself out because then it'd be homunculus. You've heard turtles all the way down, right? Well, it's homunculus all the way down because there's a homunculus inside the homunculus's brain that's watching you, right? So there's a homunculus in your brain, and there's a homunculus in that homunculus's brain, and so on and so forth.
Like a Russian doll.
Exact, ad infinitum. So it keeps going for forever.
Gotta show that MIB.
Yeah, there you go. In neural anatomy, we already talked about the cortical homunculus, which is the one that you pulled up with the unproportionate sizes of the body, and it represents, it's a neurological map of the areas of the human brain and the body. And the one that we're going to be talking about today, it was popularized in the 16th century, and it's the alchemical homunculus. Homunculi for plural. And this revolves around alchemy and the philosophical art of it. Alchemy, for those that don't know, is it's a magical process of transformation, creation, and combination. In alchemy, it is an artificial human created by magic. A homunculus does the bidding of its creator. But before we get into that, I want to give a background of where these ideas came from, how these ideas were implemented in people's minds, because it came from somewhere, and that's the picture that I want to paint today. The concept comes from a formally adopted biological science that's preformationism, and it states that everything in nature comes from a smaller version of itself. So essentially what I was talking about, the homunculus argument, where it's a little man within your brain that's watching you, and then ad infinitum, well, a little person turns into a grown person. That's what they believed back then.
Like if you go back and study like the origins of sex and why most people like watching gangbang porn, I know it sounds kind of like out there, that all the tribes, they didn't understand that there was one sperm. So the entire tribe would have sex with, so all that made sense because then everyone would be the child's father, and it was good for the community. That's why it's the number one searched.
It taps into our ancestral roots, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I know that's weird. But I wanted to get weird with this podcast.
Trust me, we're gonna get weird, bro. Don't you worry about that. So you have this idea of preformationism, where every little grown thing comes from a little version of itself. And Daddy Pythagoras, right? Daddy, because it all goes back to Pythagoras.
Yeah,
is credited with originating the term spermism, and he is also, I don't know if you knew, because I learned this recently, he's the father of eugenics, right? So that's that's what I said, and that's why Plato talks about eugenics in his work, The Republic, because Pythagoras paved the way for all these great minds. Spermism is the idea that the father contributes essential characteristics of their offspring, while, again, this is going to get controversial, while the mother only contributes a material substrate. Okay, we're going to go there, and I know that sounds really bad, but this is history. These men were products of their time, so don't crucify me. And Aristotle agreed with Pythagoras and elaborated on the concept, that which lasted until the 17th century. So you have these guys in the years 400, 500, 600, 700, and their ideas lasted until the 17th century. Through the end of the 18th century. That's
and that
crazy.
was not long ago. That's when America was founded. These occultists.
That's what, dude, if you think about it, racism ended, what, 50, 60 years ago? It's not that long ago that people, and there's still racist people even today.
There's so many racist people. What's wrong with people?
You know what I mean? We're all human.
I know what it is, bro. It's just that people are scared of what they don't know. And it's also victimhood. This is where I think it's at, is that people need someone, hey, look, you need to point the finger at me and say I'm the bad guy. They want to point a finger, this person is oppressing us, this is it, this, you know. And I think that's also where it is, the fear. It's all fear. And I hate it. I don't like it.
Yeah, neither do I. I think we're all homunculus at the end of the day, and we all bleed the same. So let's all treat each other with some respect. So we have the idea of Aristotelian biology, and this was the ideas of Aristotle and in his works of biology, that Aristotle influenced pre-modern natural scientists of the time. And during Aristotle's time, they viewed reproduction from two different angles: that of spontaneous generation and sexual generation. Spontaneous generation was prevalent in Greek mythology, which influenced Aristotle. Therefore, he influenced the rest of those people. During his time, it was pretty much fact. It was accepted as true. Nobody was questioning the narrative. And they believed that spontaneous generation could be triggered at will by mixing the correct natural ingredients and allowing them to putrefy. Putrefaction is going to be playing a big role in today's lecture or presentation. I don't know what you want to call this. For example, they believe that a little baby chick the reason that a baby chick would come to being and become alive was because the gelatinous phlegm inside of the egg would putrefy, and that would birth the chick. This is what these people were thinking, which they aren't essentially wrong. You can start seeing where they kind of were stumbling, but you got to remember, they were trying to figure out religion, sciences, everything all at once. So it was a lot of information that they were processing, and they were doing pretty good for, again, if this lasted to the 17th, 18th century, they were doing pretty damn well of coming up with ideas.
How do they build the pyramids?
This is something that's a whole nother episode of these ideas that have been implemented in our Rothschild and Rockefeller education systems that really blur the lines between ancient civilizations and all that stuff. So.
And the Rockefeller Center got the Prometheus statue right in the front of Rockefeller Plaza.
No, he's Lucifer. So, I mean, they worship the serpent, the knowledge bringer. That's the whole thing in the Garden of Eden. It was Sophia, right, from the Gnostic cosmology, that was telling Eve to eat from the tree so they would learn that they were in a false matrix. Again, back to this homunculus idea of Yaldabaoth and his cronies, where man has always been a homunculus in the figurative sense and a literal sense, if you want to believe the stories of creation. This goes back to mythology. Mythology is the psychology of humanity, if you really want to think about it that way. I've heard Daddy Manly P. Hall talk about it like that.
Daddy Manly P. Hall.
Manly Penis Hall, bro.
That's a very manly P.
Yeah. So in Metamorphosis, Ovid says that bees come from rotting cattle, wasps come from horses, scorpions from crab shells, snakes from decomposing spinal cords, and perhaps mice from slime. And varying subjects that are put through different levels of putrefaction make different things. Okay, this is going to play a role. This is an Aristotelian thought, and this is what inspired all these alchemists of their time.
Putrefaction.
Yeah. So when things rot.
The fifth stage of death.
The fifth. Well, see, I didn't even know that. The fifth stage of death. So this is after everything has already left the body, and this is how you get people who are bloated and stuff like that. They're putrefying. They are decaying. They're rotting, essentially. So they believe that this created new life.
Reminds me of the mummies.
Well, I think I have a different take on the mummies. I think that they were preserving the body so they could come back to it at a certain time, right? So that's what I think mummies are. But people were eating mummies. There is medicinal cannibalism, which we could do a whole episode on that, where people back then, they were eating corpses because they thought it was good for them and it helped them with digestion and all these things. So people were eating mummy dust as well. And there was at a time where graves were being robbed so much that they had to put a stop to it. Medicinal cannibalism. Look into it, bro. It's messed up.
That's wild.
In
Wow.
In etymologies, the 7th century bishop Isidore of Seville claimed honeybees were generated out of rotting cattle, bumblebees from horses, drones from mules. So it got more specific as time went on, right? So they're taking these ideas and transforming them as time went on. And Virgil, the poet Virgil from Dante's Inferno, he took this a step further in his work Georgics. And Virgil wrote about how to replenish a beehive with artificial bees through the use of begonia. Now, this is where it's going to get a little bit weird, and we're gonna crank it up to 10 after this, because begonia was a ritual based on the belief that bees were spontaneously regenerated from a cow's carcass. Now, the way that this was done, and I don't condone animal violence, but you got to understand that if these people back then, if they did this to an animal, imagine what they wouldn't do to a human. This is the beating of a cow as to not break its skin until it's dead and it's pretty much pulp. And when you would let this sit, the bees would eventually generate from the rotting corpse of this cow that you just beat to a pulp. Very dark. So you're supposed to take this cow and just beat the living crap out of it until it liquefies itself inside. Then you spray a little bit of thyme and cinnamon and all this stuff, and from that, there comes bees. These are, again, the scholars claim that the ritual had more of a poetic merit to it. It was genius. It was not an actual.
The bees are dying. We need to smush some cows.
You need to kill a cow, exactly. So, but this is just the way that people viewed how things came to be. And again, they are products of their time. And I want to read a little bit. A narrow site restricted for its use, and this is from Virgil, The Ritual of Begonia. A narrow site restricted for its use is chosen first. They wall it in, impose a narrow arching roof, insert 4 windows, sloping toward the winds for feeble light. They find a 2-year calf with sprouting horns, whose nostrils and whose breathing mouth they stop, so they kill it. Enclose, despite his struggles, beat and pulverize the carcass while they leave the skin intact. I want to talk about how there is a symbolic representation to things and a literal comprehension to things. Maybe these guys are writing with green language, but it's very specific to use this violence and this gruesomeness when writing about a secret message. We know cryptography, we know all these things, and back then magicians and all these different people, they wanted to hide the fact that they were doing magic. I know that, but I'm just reading it from the literal point of view, and later we can get into the symbolism behind it. They pulverize it in the carcass while they leave the skin intact. Here, his flanks, all this is done. When west wind ruffles ocean's waves in spring. So you see this poetic language of like, is this really a ritual, or are they trying to hide something? And before meadows bloom in bright new colors, before the chattering swallows hangs her nest in rafted barns, meanwhile within the corpse the fluids heat, the soft bones tepify, and creatures fashioned wonderfully appear. These are the bees, first void of limbs, but soon aware with wings, they swarm. After all this is done and everything is rotting, here come the bees. Aristotle, he also had an explanation for lice and what they called itch mites. And this was purely, a lot of these things were purely based on observation. You got to remember that back then they didn't have morticians or people who do autopsies. That was forbidden. That was a forbidden art. You'd be ruled a necromancer if you were to dig up a body and try to examine it, or vivisect it, or dissect it, or do whatever it was that you were trying to do with it. So
and that's what Da Vinci did a lot. Do you know about that?
Yes, and that's where all these ideas of Frankenstein come from, because it was a forbidden art. It was necromancy. That's what they were accused of doing, because there were some people who were using these bodies for other extracurricular activities, if you know what I mean. You know, there's always that aspect of it. And Aristotle's theory of lice, that they were produced out of the flesh. Right, so he would see these, what he called eruptus forms that would come, so like pus and just pimples, and he would see the lice come out of that. So he said, oh, well, the body's producing these lice because there's a lot of humidity within the body. Mind you, this is what these guys were thinking back then. Aristotle's theory of sexual generation was that every material substance must contain matter and form. And these two forms is sperm, which is the almost pure form, and menstrual blood, which is the almost pure matter. Now, the sperm acts as a form to the matter supplied by the menstrual blood in order to produce a living being. What what Aristotle believed was that at intercourse, there was a battle going on between the sperm and the menstrual blood. There was a war going on. And depending on who won was depending on what would be born, either a male or a female. So if the menstrual blood won, a female would be born, and vice versa. If the sperm won, then a male would be born. So we have this early idea of biology, of reproduction being talked about by Aristotle. And this is what shaped up into the 18th century, bro, these ideas, and other great minds, right, that would take ideas and change them.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so if the male semen gains the mastery, it brings the material over itself. But if it gets mastered, it changes over either into its opposite or else into extinction. And this is kind of, again, misogynist, but the opposite of the male is the female, which is female in the virtue of its inability to affect concoction and of the coldness of its blood-like nourishment. And that's the generation of animals. So again, there's essentially a battle going on between the sperm and the menstrual blood. Aristotle was a product of his time. Women were seen as inferior to men. Aristotle, like I said, accounted the gender differences because he believed that males were hotter than females. And because
that goes into like have you ever seen you watch The Office?
Mm-hmm.
When Dwight was trying to have a child with Angela, he said, you got to have a male. All you got to do is put the temperature at like 60 degrees or something. So I bet you that's where it comes from.
Well, did you know Michael Scott was actually a magician of antiquity?
Dude, I just learned that. That's wild. Yeah.
Because of their greater heat, male embryos arrive at a greater degree of perfection than females do. And these are Aristotle's words. Aristotle states females are weaker and colder in their nature, and we should look upon the female state as it were a deformity. Because of the absence of the sexual appendage, right, the penis, this further proved that women lack perfection. And these are the words of Aristotle. Yeah, dude. Oh, it gets much worse than this. It gets way worse than this. During the time, women were essentially viewed as contributing only secondarily in generation. So they were pretty much incubators at the time. And Giles of Rome compares the sperm to a carpenter and the menstrual blood to wood. So man was the epicenter of everything. Man was the most powerful. Sperm was the most powerful. Was the nectar of the gods. And women were only there to just hold the seed until it was born. And that's the idea that they had back then. Aristotle didn't quite believe that human beings couldn't be born without both parents, but his followers, after the fact, they didn't discriminate against these heretical ideas of coming up and making a man outside the matrix that is a woman. This is his fault because sperm was given supernatural abilities and it had pretty much like supernatural powers. It could cause giants and all these other different monstrosities, which Paracelsus talks about, where your ill-spent seed would go into the ground or something and it would create a monster. So us as kids, bro, we probably made a few homunculus and monsters with that sock that we had in high school.
I always think about that, dude. I always think about like, yo, it's going somewhere. Like, if it's a condom wrapper or if whatever it is, where is it going? What's developing? Like, something's got to be created with your DNA.
With the hot sauce that was putting hot sauce in his condoms allegedly to kill off the sperm.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard about that. Yeah,
it makes you think, right? So the idea,
because it makes it hot.
Well, no, because it's killing the sperm, so they can't use it for anything else. But probably it makes it hot. I mean, I don't know.
Trying to make some homunculuses.
Probably. So this would trigger the idea that what would happen? So after Aristotle, what would happen if we inserted this nectar of the gods, this sperm, this supernatural thing, into something other than a woman's womb? And in comes the alchemical homunculus, which will be the center of our talk from here on out. And I want to brace the listeners for a lot of the things I'm about to say, because it does get really weird at some points, and I do bring up some heretical ideas. But again, I'm just a researcher. Don't crucify me.
Bro, this is like my favorite podcast ever.
So there you go. They thought that inside the sperm was another little man, just like driving, like Galactica, just fighting its way in towards the egg of the woman. That's
It
what
makes
people
sense.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes
you would
sense.
think of it. So the first mention of a homunculus is traced back to this enigmatic alchemist named Zosimos of Panopolis, or Zosimos of Alchemista is what they called him. He was Greco-Egyptian. He was a Gnostic mystic, and he lived towards the end of the 3rd and beginning of the 4th century AD. He wrote a series of books. The oldest known literature on alchemy that we know of was written by this guy Zosimos. Although Zosimos's homunculus is not like our traditional alchemical version, Carl Jung, he perceived the first concept of the homunculus in Zosimos's writing called On Virtue. He describes a dream that he had. And this is from a translation. And as he was saying these things and I was pressing him to talk, his eyes became like blood and he vomited forth his flesh. And I saw him change into a mutilated homunculus. But in the text it says anthroparian, biting himself and wounding himself with his own teeth. Seized with fear, I thought, it is not thus that the composition of water is produced, and I was convinced that I had understood well. Mind you, this is all green language. These guys were alchemists. They were trained in the art of cryptography and speaking in symbols. Why? Because they would be killed otherwise if they were to come out and say, hey, we're mixing these abominations together, these two things. I'm mixing the sperm of a bird and a man to create a winged man. You would be killed for that. That was witchcraft. That was necromancy. That was whatever it was. Carl Jung being a fan of alchemy. And alchemy is, again, it's symbolic and psychological. It's an actual practical art, how it is psychological. And it's about purifying the world of its impurities. And this dream that Zosimos had represents metals and other substances undergoing alchemical treatment in a lab. And the anthroparion is not an example of an artificial life, but it's symbolic in alchemy. It's metals turning into other metals. And this is why some scholars call the anthroparion a pseudo homunculus. But the concept of this little man in a vial, the whole quote is he's talking to this little man in the vial who's talking to him. And this is when he sees him throw up his flesh and transform into something else. Alchemy for Zosimos was much more than an art. It was a religious experience. He was a follower of Hermes Trismegistus, right? Because it was during the Gnostic era. And Hermes preached the very Gnostic idea that the world is a prison. The body is a prison for the soul. We are all here because of the archons. They're suppressing us. So the practice of alchemy to distill, purify matter from its dark attributes, Zosimos and his followers hoped to remove the impurity of matter. And the goal was to, quote unquote, resurrect the material world. So when these guys were practicing this, they actually thought that they were affecting reality on a higher level by doing these things, by doing these arts, the alchemy, because not only was it a practical thing, it was also a spiritual thing for them. It's very cryptic. Like I said, the history of alchemy goes from from Egypt. I mean, that's where the term comes from.
I think there's some truth to it. I think that, think about the placebo effect, how our whole entire body can transform through a belief system. Why wouldn't stuff like this work? In my opinion, that's what I think.
Absolutely. Look at Kundalini. Kundalini is the belief that if you meditate enough, you are able to trigger a biological change within your body. Where the serpent energy comes up and you change your DNA, your biological makeup through what? Through meditation. And that's what a lot of people say that they try to suppress by demonizing yoga and demonizing all these things, because it goes against the mainstream narrative of religion. I see it as a brokered experience. So you can't get through God unless you go through the church, and you have to pay your tithings. But then we're going to have this one guy. We're going to have a Hermes that's going to act as a messenger to talk to God for you. And we're going to put in a good word for you, bro. We're going to put in a good word for DoeNut. And we might save you a seat in heaven if you're a good little boy.
The world elite, whoever they are, they're doing these rituals, and if they're not elites, and let's just say they're just video music awards, and that you could see that they're doing rituals at the Super Bowl, there's some sort of harvesting of energy. And if you call it like yoga, kundalini, but even Tai Chi, I don't understand how is yoga like evil? Like, this is a serious question, but Tai Chi isn't. I mean, it's like the same thing, but it's a martial art. So it's like, but people with Tai Chi masters, they're able to have like cannonballs hit them, and they're able to not have it even affect their body. So there is stuff going on that I don't know what's going on.
The way I like to see the world is how Al-Kindi, which was an Arabic philosopher, he said that everything was light. Everything emanates light. And Al-Kindi inspired John Dee, by the way. He looked upon him as like a god, right? He took a lot of his ideas, but essentially he viewed everything as light.
Like when we first did our podcast on Illuminati Confirmed, and then you start, because I've been trying to learn about homunculus, but I was calling it homunculus because I don't know anything. So I was making these videos like homunculus, they're Johnny Depp trial, right? And you're like, it's homunculus. And then you said that there's more stages to the homunculus, that there's not just one. That, and I was just so...
Oh, we're going to get into that, bro. We're going to learn some stuff today, some dark stuff. So essentially what Al-Kindi was talking about was, so he was a polymath. He was this guy who studied everything. He talked about, look at his school, bro. Go back to his school. What does it say their school? Aristotelianism. So he even took ideas from Aristotle, what we're talking about today.
Gotcha.
So all these guys were inspiring themselves, but there's always those one Pythagoras at the core of it. And from there, Aristotle.
Daddy Pythagoras.
And from there, you have Plato, and he paved the way for Christianity. And the Gnostics came first. Christianity came after that. So these guys paved the way for what we know the world to be today. So Al-Kindi talked about how we all emanate light. We're all these light beings. It reminds me eerily of what Crowley was saying, that we're all stars or something of that nature.
Right. Well, even this is Liber. So
Liber, yeah.
Probably where Aleister Crowley got his Liber idea.
Liber means book in Latin, I believe.
Novum is 9.
Yeah, I don't know Latin.
November is actually 9.
Al-Kindi talked about how we're all light. We all emanate light, and the way our lights interact creates an effect. Now, the magician is the person who can manipulate the light coming from everything. This mic is putting out light. That tree outside is putting out light. It's interacting with my light, and something else is going on. It's like this unseen world that is outside our vision. So it has to do with optics and all these things. And he believed that the people, what I consider the magicians, are the people who can manipulate that light. Those are the people creating magic, where they're able to bend the light, this metaphysical light, and point it wherever they want. And I think that's what magic is. And I love the Al-Kindi worldview. Like, just imagine, but it's like a cosmic web.
He looks like a boss too.
Yeah, bro. These guys back then were on such a different level from today. And it seems as we progress that people get
stupider.
No, I didn't want to be mean, but yeah, sure. More ignorant, I guess.
Bro, I feel like I'm so stupid, dude. Like, just the more I read about people back then and how smart they were and how they understood so much, spoke multiple languages.
Well, you got to understand, they weren't being influenced by everything else that's going on around us right now with technology, with school, the school system itself, what they put in these textbooks and all these things. That's part of the conspiracy, bro. That's why when people say, oh, well, I don't believe in conspiracies, bro. But I believe in God. That's the biggest, religion is the biggest conspiracy of them all. What are you talking about, bro? So people tell me,
I've always been questioning. Like, I grew up going to temple, Jewish. I grew up Jewish, and I would always question the rabbis, and the rabbis would question me, and then I would question the school teachers, and it was just always questioning. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah, and I like to respect everybody's belief systems too, and I know that you do too. Like, I know you're not coming at it from a weird angle. A lot of people do. It's so weird. Like the conspiracy movement, they try to like go after
demonize
people
everything, yeah,
and demonize, yeah. And I'm just like,
part of
what?
the division. It's part of the division, and it's part of the system to be able to break everybody apart. So if it's not this conspiracy, it's the other conspiracy, right? We have flat Earth and we have the Globers, and they're going at a war with each other. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So
Right.
to the
And why
homunculus.
can't there be a discussion about it?
There
Like,
can't.
no,
There can't. It's either the polar opposite. It's either you are or you're not. You can't be in between. It's like, well, I'm agnostic to it. Well, it doesn't matter, bro. You know what I mean?
You gotta pick a side.
I want to get back into this homunculus because we have a lot to cover.
Yes. Sorry.
The first genuine homunculus. So towards this time, we're at the 4th century AD. We still haven't seen the word homunculus in any writing, any literature, the actual word homunculus. The first genuine homunculus, where it's an artificial man for a magical purpose, is the story of Solomon and Absal. The original story is Greek, and it was in the 4th century AD. But in the mid 1400s, there was a Persian poet named Jami who took this story and made his own version. And you'll see that a lot of these stories throughout history, such as the story of creation and any other story, they all have their own versions depending on their cultural influences of the time, right? And that's essentially what religion is. You have the Hindu story of creation, you have the West story of creation, whatever. You have the Mesopotamian story of creation, you have the Egyptian story of creation, depending on the cultural and geographical influences of the minds at the time. There are various versions of the story that I'm about to tell, but essentially it's about a king who is childless, and he found sex with women repugnant. So he didn't want to, women, they're so, you know, so he didn't want to have sex. And the king was sad, and he had this mystic, HOMUNCULUS was his name, and this was his advisor, his counselor. He had lived in a cave most of his life. He practiced magic, and he taught the king the secret sciences. So we have this mystic, this magician, whatever you want to call him. One of the secret sciences that he gave to the king was abstaining from sexual intercourse to gain knowledge. So semen retention,
no fap.
Yeah, exactly. Magical masturbation, whatever you want to call them. So he advised the king on creating a male heir by artificial means. And this is where it gets good. All he needed was the king's sperm and a vessel shaped like a mandragora, which is, have you ever seen you pulled it up earlier, where it's like that looks like a man. So mandragora, and it looks like a little, I think it's been one of the Harry Potter movies and all this stuff, where when they pulled it, it screamed or something. I believe that was it. So in the story, you start to see the evolution of sperm's role. There you go. In the story, they believe it was either one of those or a vessel, like an alchemical flask shaped like one of those. So they would take the sperm and put it in there, and you see the sperm's role in the creation of the homunculus change throughout time, because Calliculas didn't use menstrual blood. He only used the sperm because, again, it was seen as supernatural. And if it could do all these things, why not? Why do we need women? Why? You can't live with them. You can't live without them, right? He creates this homunculus, which he names Solomon. And Solomon had a nurse that would take care of him. And he ends up falling in love with this nurse, even though his father was like, hey, you can't attach yourself to this material world. Is a very Platonic idea of letting go. The Pythagoreans would let go of all of their belongings, all their material assets, and turn it into the organization. And they would let go of all that to detach themselves from the material world. They wanted to ascend to a higher level without having to worry about the money in the bank, you know, how many cars you got, how many houses I got, none of that. It was strictly, yeah, I'm going to give it to the organization, and I'm going to go take a vow of silence for 5 years. That's what the Pythagoreans did. They took a vow of silence for 5 years. And if you were to say one word, bro, you'd be dead to them. They would give you back your assets twofold, and they would hold the funeral for you. And they would never talk to you ever again if you were to break that vow of silence. Bro, super brutal. Yeah, so he ends up, yeah. They were hardcore, bro. They took these secrets.
But they didn't have TV back then, so maybe it was easier.
That's why, bro, it was all about learning. It was all about obtaining knowledge. It was about becoming this philosopher king, if you will. Like that's why in Plato's Republic, it was about they needed a class of people to rule who didn't have any interest in society. They couldn't have kids. They couldn't benefit monetarily. They were there to hold the peace and rule society, which is, if you think about it, it's amazing, because if you look at these politicians now, what are they doing, bro? They're corrupt as can be. So Plato was like, nah, let's take that out of the equation. They have to be eunuchs pretty much. You can't have sex. You can't do nothing. You're just going to rule society, right? You're going to have a group of them. So this Solomon goes to fall in love with his nurse Absol, and his father was like, hey, don't do it. You know, don't attach yourself to this lower world. And Solomon's purpose, because he was a homunculus, remember this, was to ascend to the celestial regions between the physical world and spiritual realm. And he was to become a platonic sage for his father, right? In order to, one who becomes righteous, holy, and wise. That's what he was, because when you make a homunculus, he does your bidding. He's supposed to do whatever you say and put it to do. And we're going to get into other things about here coming up next, where it's going to get a little bit weird.
We're going to have sex with these things.
Yeah, well, there, you know. So that's something else. But the idea of that you need to do the bidding of your creator. And against the Solomon's dad's wishes, him and Absol, they go out, right? They leave the kingdom. And his dad finds him by magic and makes them impotent, so they can't have kids. It's almost like a Romeo and Juliet type of thing, where they try to drown themselves, but a water spirit saves Solomon, but Absol dies. He's rescued by this water spirit. He goes back to his dad, and the mystic HOMUNCULUS is like, yo, bro, if you meditate with me for 40 days in a cave, I'll bring Absol back for you. Lo and behold, they're in this cave, they're doing this ritual, and HOMUNCULUS tries to invoke Aphrodite. And as he's invoking her, she's appearing, and she's very beautiful, and she appears to Solomon, and he forgets all about Absol, bro. He forgot about his other chick. He's like, yo, Aphrodite is beautiful, right? And there he forgets all about Absol and rejects all carnal love and assumes kingship, how his father always wanted, how the good little homunculus that he was. It's an allegorical story of rejecting the physical world in favor of the, again, platonic world of forms. So Plato had this idea that there was an upper dimension and everything that was in there was perfect. And this is a reflection of a more perfect world, right? We have a horse, and then you have the form of a horse, which is the perfect horse. But then the horses that populate this world are imperfect. They're imperfect versions. If it hasn't gotten a little bit weird, we're about to crank it to 10, bro. And this is the topic that got me into the homunculus, what really intrigued me. I have this other podcast called the Occult Book Club, where I team up with Paranoid American Comics. Check them out. We get together and we read obscure books in history, and we review them, and we give a full breakdown of the book on episodes. And one of the books that we came across was the Liber Vacay. How I mentioned earlier, we have the allegorical and the symbolic portrayals of the homunculus. It's time to get down and dirty, right? This idea of creating artificial life by the Islamic world was taken with open arms, bro. These guys were like, during the Middle Ages, were like, oh yeah, dude, we're gonna do this whole thing. And you had two arms of, I guess you could call it science, arise. And you had magia naturalis, which is natural magic, and then alchemy during the Middle Ages. Those who were able to master nature were seen to have extraordinary powers. They had, there was divination. They could change the course of the moon. They were omnipotent. That was the whole thing with Pythagoras. He was omnipotent. He could tell the future. He could, because they understood nature, right? That's a natural magic. Books that would become known to be grimoires were instructions on magical practices, how to do something. Again, this gets convoluted with the magic and all this stuff, but the pseudo-Galenic and Platonic grimoire that we're going to be covering is called the infamous Liber Vacay, or the Book of the Cow. And I stumbled across this one night while reading some Manly P. Hall. And it was a story, which I'll pull up here in a little bit to read it towards the end. It's a story about this Freemason who creates 10 different homunculi, and he keeps them in his lodge, in his Freemasonic lodge. One of his assistants gets so annoyed by the homunculus that he kills them all because they were talking too much. But each homunculus had a different magical attribute, and we'll get into that story later. This book, you're not going to find it on Audible or Kindle because the original is in very fragmented Arabic text and only exists in various translations, and the most popular translation being the Latin one, which the way I get my information was from a source that translated it. As you recall earlier, we talked about Aristotelian biology, spontaneous generation, and the sickening ritual of begonia. And this book combines all of that and more. Now, this is where it's going to get, just buckle up, all right, bro? So the book is broken down into minor and major sections, and it consists of roughly 80 experiments. And there are recipes how to grow plants in an hour, methods to make armies, giants, and other forms appear in the sky. It also shows you how, and this is what really struck my interest, construct different magical houses where people will suffer epileptic seizures, start to tremble, hallucinate, or die. So it shows you how to make this perilous chapel type of thing in a house, right? It instructs you on how to be able to speak to birds or make lamps that can't be turned off. It gets really, I don't condone the animal abuse, but you got to understand that the elites are using the same magic that is written in these books today. So if they will do this to an animal, who knows what they'll do to a human, right? The Liber Vacae can be traced back to the end of the 9th century. And it goes by various names here in the West: Vacae Platonis, Liber Anaguimus, Liber. It's got a whole, but Legis Platonis, a whole bunch of different names. It's a pseudo-Platonic text where the person is Galen, which is a Roman physician, is talking about a work that Plato was supposedly wrote. But this is almost like having a pen name for the time. We know that Plato didn't write about this. We know Galen wasn't writing about this. These magicians of back then, these people who were writing these grimoires, would use pen names. They would use like the Necronomicon. Who wrote it? Well, we don't know, right? They say John Dee translated it. There's a whole thing behind it. Well, who was it? Was it really some guy named Al-Habdul Hazred? Probably not, right? That's a pseudonym.
Frankenstein came out anonymously when that first came out, and it was totally Percy Shelley, but they were saying that it was Mary Shelley or whatever her name is. Percy Shelley wrote books anonymously on anti-church and sent it out to everybody. So yeah, the pen name.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this pen name to hide the fact that they were doing these things. Now, if it's symbolic for something much deeper within the text, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So it's a major and a minor. The minor section, to the author, says that it's known to the public. It's exoteric, and it's various things, how to make optical illusions and all that stuff. And the major section, he states, is more noble, quote unquote, and esoteric in nature. So it's more specific, higher levels of magic. Now, the first 4 experiments of the major section are the macabre ones, right? The ones that we're going to be talking about, the ones that piqued my interest and of scholars and researchers and everybody alike. And these gruesome experiments, they even led some researchers to omit certain details from it. They were like, hey, you know, some things are better left unsaid, because some of the things in this book get pretty sickening. It's like, wait, what? You're doing what? So let's get to it, bro. In order to relate the relation between the cow and this book, because it's called Liber Vacae, the Book of Cows, we're going to start with the 4th experiment of the major section that gives instruction on how to generate bees. Now that sounds familiar, right? Because we talked about Virgil and Begonia. You start off by taking a cow and building a house with 14 small windows on the eastern side. And when I think of this, I think about Abramelin and how Crowley, right? Abramelin's ritual on how to summon a guardian angel, and how Crowley tried to do it. And he had to buy the bullskin house because it had the windows on a certain side and a certain amount of rooms and a certain orientation. Because again, I believe it goes back to light, bro. How they are able to bend light within these buildings and manipulate it and use it. So you start off by taking a cow, building a house, 14 small windows on an eastern side. And this could all be Twilight language, but this is what this book says. Then you must seal off all of them shut. Behead the cow, drain all of its blood, and reattach the head back again. So far, so good. You then sew shut the mouth, eyes, ears, nose, anus, and vulva. And this is where it gets a bit weird if we haven't already. So similar to how Virgil beat his cow, you're supposed to take the biggest dog penis you are able to find and beat the cow with it. So now I've had people do, when I first covered this, and I'm not, I'm not lying. Some scholars think that it was a mistranslation, but that's what it says. It says dog's penis. But not only is it a dog penis, it's the biggest one. Don't laugh, Donut. This is serious shit, bro. All right, this is serious stuff. Take the biggest one that you can find. And dude, I've had people listen to that episode because that episode like blew up. I've had people message me, telling me, asking me how to take care of their homunculus, how to make one, you know, how to find the biggest dog penis. I'm like, dude, I'm not your guy. Don't come to me for this stuff because I don't know.
You can get that information on the one-on-one Patreon. Go subscribe to his Patreon and you can get that info.
I'm gonna make a Patreon tier about finding the biggest dog penis, the quest for the dog penis. So
that's what people like, bro. People want that.
I don't know, bro. When I came across this, I was really afraid. Like I told my co-host, I'm like, "Do you want to talk about it?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm game, bro. I'm so about it." So I brought it up. So you take, and this is quote, take a big dog penis and incessantly beat the cow with it until its flesh is discolored and its bone is broken. Now, wow. That's funny, right? It's imagine, funny, yeah. Just going to town on, and this isn't even the weirdest part, all right, bro? So after this step, you split open the cow skin after 7 days and remove the marrow-like substance, which you must then grind up with an unknown herb. You take the mixture and put it in the corner of the house where it eventually becomes worms. Every day thereafter, you need to open a window and throw a handful of powdered bees at the worms until you have living bees. Now, if you do this in reverse, you get a cow. So the whole step that I said, you get a cow in reverse of this entire process.
Bro, this is like Legos.
Yeah, right. This is like esoteric Legos. Now, let's get to the homunculus recipes because this is the one that really piqued my interest. What pseudo-Plato calls a rational animal. And the experiment starts like this, and this is, quote, whoever wishes to make a rational animal should take his own water while warm, your own water while warm, if you know what I mean, and let him mix it with an equal measure of stone that is called stone of the sun. This is a stone that shines at night like a lamp until the place in which it is found is illuminated. It's very cryptic. I think it's maybe a meteorite. Like find a meteorite because meteorites glow, right? I don't know. It's like a color out of space type of thing. There's a study where the powder of projection of alchemy was actually crushed meteorite. That's what they were using back then to transmit lead into gold. And after this, you take a cow or a ewe, which is a sheep. Its vulva is cleansed with medicines and its womb made capable of receiving what is to be put into it. Now, if a cow is used, the blood of the ewe is put on its vulva and vice versa. And if a ewe is used, you put the blood of the cow on the vulva. The orifice is then plugged with the stone of the sun. After this, the animal is put in a dark house, and every week it is given a pound of the other animal's blood to eat. One must then take some of the sunstone, as much sulfur, as much magnet, and as much green tutia, I guess that's how you say it, tutia. He should grind them, mix with willow sap, dry in the shadows. When the cow or sheep gives birth, one must take that form and put it in that powder that you just made of the willow sap and all that stuff. And then when you put it in there, it's going to get human skin. This is the homunculus. You take that human skin covered gelatinous thing now and you put it into a great glass or lead vessel. And after 3 days, it's going to become hungry and it's going to start moving around. This is our homunculus, right? You're going to start feeding it the blood from the decapitated mother for 7 days. This is what pseudo-Plato calls the animal form that is agreeable to many miracles will be finished. And this being can be used to change the course of the moon, change oneself into a cow or a sheep. And if you take this shape and you nourish it for 40 days and feed it blood and milk, nothing else, and the sun does not see it, you may use its bodily fluids to anoint your feet and you'll be able to walk on water, bro. Finally, if a man, and this is quote, if a man has raised it and nourished it until a whole year passes and left it in milk and rainwater, it will tell him all things that are absent. Walking on water sounds very specific, right? Who walked on, oh, Jesus walked on water. Was he using a homunculus? I don't know. Was he a homunculus? We'll get to that later because, like I said, it's going to get really weird on this episode if it hasn't gotten weird. And I have the remaining other experiments of this book So essentially, it's telling us the purpose of a homunculus is to use it for magical purposes. So you make it, you dissect it, you use its bodily parts for magical. It gives you godlike powers, bro. That's what a homunculus is.
Dude, this could be working. I mean, I've never done that. Do you know anyone who's actually done that? Like, it could be that's what's up. Like, maybe that is what's going on. You know, like, I'm never gonna be able to do that because I can't build furniture from IKEA. How can I even make it a homunculus?
But
This
you know,
is fascinating, bro. And when I laugh, it's because I'm really enjoying it,
bro, it's funny.
And bro, I talk on my channel a lot about sex rituals and all the time. And every time I bring on someone and bring up this stuff, they tell me to take it out of the podcast and stuff like that. And I'm just like, what? Like, this is what's going on. Like, so I wasn't like laughing in any disrespect at all. Just
all good, bro.
The words tickle my mind when
it's funny,
you
bro.
talk about beating someone with the biggest dog penis. It's so specific.
Exactly. It's like, how do you know you have the biggest dog dick? Like, what if you use this dog dick and then you go find another dog that's got a bigger dick than the original one? You're like, what's going on? So, bro, I get it, bro. And mind you, it could be green language. Who knows? Because these guys were cryptographers. They talked in this Twilight language. So it could be a hidden code within the code, bro. With, you know, the actual answers might be behind, you know, it's not a dog dick. It's something else, right? It's code word for something, but we don't have the key to understand it.
Right.
We're
It's
just
esoteric.
Exactly. The next two experiments are essentially the same thing, except the matrix, the womb, is provided by a female monkey in one. And in the third, the womb is an unidentified animal. So to recap, the generation of the bees was the fourth and final experiment on the ones that are like weird. And then the one that I just said was the second. And now we're going to get into the third and the fourth. An ointment made from the eyes and brain of the homunculus birthed by the monkey allows you to see spirits and demons, and drinking a brew made from its tongue allows you to talk to the demons, right? Using its liver makes trees bend over. Using its brain and the brain of a fresh human corpse, so you have to kill a person, on a dead tree makes it come back to life instantly. Using the guts of the homunculus birthed by the unidentified animal can make you impervious to pain. Using its heart wrapped in a skin of its forehead makes you invisible. So the heart wrapped in the skin of its forehead makes you invisible. And burning powder made from its body can make it rain. And finally, if you bury that powder for 14 days, the powder will give you birth to extremely poisonous snakes. There's other sets of experiments as well, because there's 80 in total. And there's one on how to generate hybrid animals, such as a cow with a human face, viper-like worms with horns and enormous eyes, bee-like worms, a final animal that if you use its fat as an ointment, can permanently transform you into a pig or an ape. Now, I don't know what that means, but apparently if you rub this stuff on you, you turn into a pig or an ape. As the experiments progress, it's just more mixtures of bodily fluids, so more and more animal and human substances, and mixed in various matrices. So one could be a sheep vagina, another one can be a cow vagina, another one can be a horse, and it gives you different chimeras. David Pingree, which is a scholar and a researcher, he considered the Liber Vitae as, quote unquote, the most flagrantly demonic Arabic books on magic. And he said that the homunculus was an artificial demon of some sorts. The experiments in the Liber Vitae are considered natural magic and not so much astral. And the difference between that is you have Goetia and you have all these other things where you use entities to do the magical stuff, right? So this entity gives you invisibility. This other entity can walk on water. This other entity can do this, X, Y, Z. Well, this is natural magic. You're using nature and a concoction made from nature to make these magical feats. So it's not, this guy thought it was, you are making a homunculus is an actual demon. If you see in full, I don't know if you watch anime, but the Full Metal Alchemist, the bad guys, they're who? They're homunculus. They're all homunculus. You have the Frankenstein is a little bit different, but the idea of the homunculus is seen all throughout, TV shows, kid shows, animations, movies. There's a movie on Netflix called Homunculus, and it's about this Japanese guy that can see people's essence for what it really is. It's really trippy.
Everything had the Illuminati eye in that show, which I didn't look too much into it, but I thought
Bro,
that was
anime is occult AF, dog. If you watch any anime, there's so much occult symbolism, and you know, the Full Metal Alchemist, which is what we're talking about. In that, spoiler alert, in that story, they're chase, because alchemy is chasing the Philosopher's Stone, where it's this stone that gives you eternal life, right? The elixir of life. It turns lead into gold. It's the magnum opus of the alchemist. From what I've read, creating gold from lead is actually a byproduct. They're not actually after that. They're actually after being able to manufacture life, to make artificial life, to become a god in a sense, to become a demiurge over life. That's based on a manga too, I believe. Look, he's covering his eyes, so that's Illuminati right there, bro.
Illuminati confirmed.
Illuminati confirmed.
There you go, right there. This idea of the homunculus goes back way, way into antiquity, and it's in religion. Now, ultimately, these experiments are for the purpose of the magician, the person practicing these things in this grimoire, this magical book, to have godlike powers. There's the debate whether it is a demon or not, because back then, this idea that women were only seen as incubators for the sperm. There's an idea that if you look at the story of Merlin from the Tale of Arthur, he's a homunculus because he was created from a woman and a succubi. I think that's how you say it, or an incubus. A succubus inserted the sperm into Merlin's mom. So he's half demon and half woman and half human, so he's like a demi demon, I guess you could call it. That's why he has magical powers. And that idea that demons, succubus and incubuses, could steal man's sperm was a big thing back then, bro. It was a real big thing that these demons could. That's why they practice chastity and all these different things of like not having sex and abstaining from sex, because they believe that demons could go in the night and steal men's sperm and deposit it into themselves. Anything could be a womb back then. If you demean the woman as being the one that creates life, which we know today from science that women are actually the ones that create life, right? They're the reason why we're here. It's like, who came first, the chicken or the egg? But these guys back then didn't know that. They had big egos. Science wasn't. So there you go. The demons impregnating Merlin's mom.
That's wild, bro. I had no idea.
And that's King Arthur, bro. That's his mentor. Merlin is the mentor, bro.
That's wild.
So this idea that demons could insert man's seed, because it's all powerful and supernatural, into women is a thing, bro. Look at that. That's a painting from what, the 1494? What is that?
It's freaky, bro. And then the one before this, look at the demon on the left.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I got some pictures.
Also on the right. They're like cutting up the animals. They're cutting the goats. They're
there you go.
They're homunculus in it.
So, again, ultimately, it's about having godlike powers as a magician. Moving on.
Yeah.
Moving on. Jabir ibn Hayyan. He was an 8th century Persian sage that was referred to as the Paracelsus of the Arabs. This is 8th century, so 16th century was Paracelsus. And in his works, Hayyan wrote about and gave instructions on how to artificially recreate products of nature, such as precious metals, stones, plants, animals, and you guessed it, man. Hayyan argued that you could not only mimic God in his creation, which is what man has always wanted to do. Right? The Tower of Babel, they wanted to reach the heavens, and all these different stories. The Garden of Eden, they wanted to eat from where God said not to eat. Not only could you mimic God in his creations, but you could also produce beings never seen before. And I think this is where they were trying to find the idea of, you see all these chimeras back then. You know, you have harpies, you have minotaurs, you have centaurs, you have all these, right, that they talk about being Nephilim descendants, where it's like when the Nephilim were done with the women, they started to insert themselves into animals and make these abominations. And I think that's what they were trying to account for. They're like, where does that come from? Well, it's, you know, creations that you've never seen before. And of course, it's at the core of it, it's sperm, because it's Aristotelian thought. Hayyan said to put it in various molds that were detachable. So think about a mold of a little person with detachable arms, head, legs. And he would put it in this contraption that I labeled the homunculus rotisserie machine, where it was this machine that you would secure the mold in, and it had concentric circles. And it was a machine where it was just the concentric circles just spinning around. And that was meant to emulate mimic the cosmic system, right? The way that the universe worked. And depending on the shape and size of the molds determined the outcome of the homunculus that you were going to get. So it would vary from a young girl with a boy's face to an adolescence with the intelligence of a man. Hayan goes on, because again, we see this idea of magic and creating man transform since the very beginning. Hayan goes on to say that there's different schools, quote unquote, for different methods on how to use the sperm for different homunculi. So, for example, if you wanted to create a winged man, you would mix the sperm of a man and a bird, and then you would get a winged homunculi. Or vice versa, if you wanted to get, a man with a cow's foot or whatever. Well, and there was all these quote unquote schools of thought that look, he's the father of modern day chemistry. That guy, this guy right here, bro, this guy, and they were occultists. Isaac Newton was an occultist. All these guys were in the occult. That's why I believe in symbolism recognition, where I've been called an armchair occultist because I don't practice anything, but I want to learn about these things because I want to be able to identify them if they come up somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, what does the one-eyed symbol mean? Well, it means XYZ. It's like, why are they putting that out there? Well, they're trying to imprint the subconscious on a cosmic level, if you will.
Right.
I have here the Jewish golem. And the Jewish golem is a little bit different because it's not our traditional homunculus.
Yes, I'm interested in this. I want to know about this because I just did a video on Frankenstein. I didn't get to go into the golem, so I didn't get to research it. So I'm really excited.
You have the Pokemon there.
There's a Google. That's what pops up. The pocket monster Pokemon.
This relates to Jack Parsons, bro, what I'm about to talk about. And it relates to John Dee. And it relates to a lot of other people. Crowley and all these guys. And this is how far back they go. The Golem of Prague is one of the more famous, if not the most famous story that involves Rabbi Judai Lo ben Bezalel. And he is from the 16th century, and he's the one that created the golem out of clay to defend the Jewish ghetto from attacks of Rudolph II. Both of which John Dee met, allegedly. John Dee met with Rabbi Judai Lo and Rudolph II. The angels told him to go visit Prague and tell Rudolph II that he was possessed by demons. So both of these guys, Prague was seen as a very magical place, bro. A place that held a lot of magic. A lot of the transmutations that were done by Edward Kelly were done at Prague. So Prague is like this weird paganistic place that holds a lot of magic. Essentially, the story is about the magical power of the Hebrew language, and its origins can be traced back to the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a book attributed to the biblical Abraham. And the text pretty much talks about how God created the cosmos from the letters. You have the Tetragrammaton and all these things in there, right? The four-lettered name of God, right? The different names of God. And in this story, go ahead.
Tetragrammaton. I got Jordan Maxwell got to school me on the Tetragrammaton.
Yeah, it's magic. So it's related to the cube and Abraxas and all this stuff. In the story, the word Amet, meaning truth, was written on the golem's forehead. And every Sabbath, in order to let the golem, quote unquote, rest, the E from Amet would be erased, and it would form Met, which meant death. So the golem would come down and die, essentially. He was the phoenix. He was Prometheus, that every day he would have to come back, right? So it's all symbolic to the same things that from the gods of antiquity that we're talking about. Mind you, these are religions that sprouted from Aristotle, Pythagoras, all these other people way before their time. One night, Rabbi Lo forgot to do this, and the golem went on a rampage. He started through the ghetto, and he started destroying everybody, killing people. There's various versions of the story, how I mentioned earlier, but eventually Rabbi Lo would be notified, and he would be able to subdue the golem, killing it. He would be able to erase that letter from its forehead. And it was stored in an attic in a synagogue in Prague, where it stayed for centuries, where they say that it was there for a long time. Although the story of the golem differs from our traditional homunculus, Paracelsian scholar Walter Pagel argues that the golem was the predecessor to Paracelsus' homunculus, because all this time we're in the 16th century and we still haven't seen the word homunculus appear in any literature until we get to Paracelsus. Before we get there, I want to make a quick pit stop. The golem is more of like an automata, like a robot, or like a cybernetic or an AI being, if you will, like a cosmic AI being. It doesn't speak. It's very dumb, if you know, for lack of a better term, but it does the bidding of its owner, right? But he went out of control, so you have a Frankenstein in there where it goes out of control and it needs to be subdued. Well, what's the whole thing behind AI in the Matrix, right? The Matrix being womb. In the movie The Matrix, they are creating homunculus within this artificial laboratory setting where Neo, when he wakes up, he is a homunculus in the Matrix, right? He was created for one purpose, for the purpose of harvesting data or energy or whatever it was in the movie. So you can see the golem as some sort of automata, like a robot, only does what it's programmed to do. It can't really do anything else. It's kind of dumb, and that's all it can really do. It doesn't really have any other special powers. But this is the first time where they didn't want to kill the homunculus, right? There's this weird aspect of having to kill the homunculus in order to do what you want it to do. Well, the golem, they really didn't need to kill it. They just needed to put it under control. And this is where it gets a bit heretical. On the topic of religious magic, because that's what a golem is, it was meant to show off the power of the Hebrew language, the tetragrammaton, and the power of word and letters. Jesus Christ being a homunculus was an idea in the 15th century, bro. Spanish theologian Alonso Tostado, it's Spanish, so tostado sounds like toasted in Spanish, and Thomas Aquinas, a theologian and a doctor of the church. And these guys were going at each other, they were writing papers, and Alonso was writing about paradoxes in religion, how things were. It's like, wait, so he was calling people out of the Bible, like, why'd you say this in this book and in this other book you have a paradox? Like, you guys there's conflicting stories here. Tostado proposed that Mary was a sealed vessel. Again, it's a variation from our traditional homunculus because there's no semen. She was Virgin Mary, but she did have menstrual blood and a womb. And although Tostado argued that Mary would not have had enough blood for a full development of Jesus in the womb, therefore he was a condensed version of a man. So she didn't have enough blood in her body for him to fully develop. So essentially, he would have had to been a miniature version of a little baby. So according to Aristotelian biology and the alchemical process, Jesus was conceived as a homunculus, a miniature human kept in a sealed vessel for the first instant of creation. And you can clip that for a clip, because I don't know if anybody's ever said that on a podcast, but Aquina argued that there was no need for sperm because the Holy Spirit was infinitely powerful and can fashion matter into form instantly. So we have this again, back to religious magic, where this metaphysical aspect of the religion is playing a role into the birth of this Messiah. That's a very heretical idea that Jesus was a homunculus, but I take it a step further because I said, this makes a lot of sense to me, and coming from a Christian background. Tostado would go on to present the repercussions of creating homunculus. So what he didn't want is the demeaning of the womb, right? It's a sacred thing. It creates life. And essentially what he didn't want was the status of mother to be demoted to just mean flask or container or something, which makes sense, right? It's like, don't demean especially now, something that's beautiful, childbirth. I have kids. I don't know about you, but childbirth and all these things, that's a beautiful thing. And women are at the core of that. Now we've learned, because of science, whatever that is nowadays, that women are the ones that actually make things happen. The idea of a homunculus goes against the views of the church, because this is something else that I didn't think about, because this gets philosophical. The idea of a homunculus gets philosophical because if God died for your sins, did he die for the sins of that homunculus that you just created? Does it have a soul? Does it have a spirit? Tostado talked about this other guy, Arnold of Villanova. The Arnaldian homunculus legend comes it was another idea that came forth where this guy, bro, was making homunculus, and before God might infuse a rational soul into the homunculus, he would kill it. So he would make a homunculus, And then as soon as it came to life, he would just smash it. Boom. He would just kill it because he's like, I don't know if God's going to possess it with like a spirit. God didn't die for that spirit in particular because according to the church, you know, God died for our sin. But if I'm creating artificial, there's like a gray area. These guys were trying to be philosophical with the repercussions of what an entitle would. If you make a homunculus, like, do you have to give it a social security number or what? How does that work? Essentially, kids are homunculus, I guess. I don't know, but you know, there's the aspects of the soul, and then René Descartes comes in there with the mind-body dualism and the, you know, what is consciousness? I think, therefore I am. Well, does the homunculus think, bro? This thing goes way deep, and the way I see it, bro, I think that Jesus might have been a homunculus because if you notice, the idea that you need to kill the homunculus in order to achieve some sort of magical power. What do we see in the story of Jesus Christ? He is crucified. But not only that, he is crucified and the church cannibalizes his body symbolically. What do we do in the Eucharist? You're partaking of the body and the blood of Christ. So you're essentially eating the homunculus's blood, which is a sacred thing because you feed the homunculus blood. And you're eating the body for what? For enlightenment. For what? For you to invoke this salvation, pretty much. That's a magical thing. So you can go to heaven and ascend this dimension. So the idea of Jesus being a homunculus is not out of the question. It is another version, like the golem, of a homunculus. The same Aristotelian idea. Constantine was the one that in the Council of Nicaea and the canon and non-canon, they're the ones that essentially, the Holy Roman Empire were the ones that essentially implemented these ideas. Don't you think that they knew about the homunculus of Aristotle? We're going to wrap up here. We have the daddy Paracelsus or the hermaphrodite Paracelsus. There's a bunch of conspiracies concerning this individual. Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim Paracelsus, right? They had to shorten up his name. They're like, this guy's name.
What was his real name?
That was his real name, bro.
Oh, there it is. Damn.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, AKA Paracelsus in the 16th century.
I gotta memorize that.
Yeah, Theophrastus von Hohenheim. You can, yeah, just
Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. You mean?
Hohenheim.
Hohenheim. That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He looked goofy, dude.
So he was, check this out. He was 5'3". He was 5'3".
He was homunculus.
He was the father of toxicology, and he coined the term, the quote, "The dose makes the poison." So imagine this guy. He was the one that came up with the idea that if you took too much of a medicine, it would kill you. And if you took just the right amount, it would make you feel better. So imagine this guy, bro, back then, just taking psychedelics or taking some sort of poison and just poisoning himself, trying to figure out. Again, these are the times, 16th century, bro. And this is how they were able to figure things out, through boots on the ground research and doing unorthodox things of their time. And without these people like Paracelsus, who hated sex and was allegedly a drunk, he viewed women as monstrosities, and we're going to get into that right now because, again, they're a product of his time. But there's a conspiracy that he was actually a hermaphrodite, and there's other conspiracies that he was a eunuch and he was castrated. And there's another conspiracy that he said that he was actually a woman with a huge clit and lips that look like a small ball sack. And that was not me. That is actual research that I came across of Paracelsus.
Man,
and it's backed up by anatomy. They have his skeleton, and they were able to study his skeleton, and they were able to come up with the fact that he had wider hips than usual. He was 5'3".
He does look like my grandma.
Cranial deformities, and allegedly he admitted to somebody about being, again, he liked men. But who knows? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't take away from the fact that he was a great mind of his time. If he was into some weird stuff, he was, because he was talking about homunculus. This is the man or person who coined the term homunculus. This is the daddy of the homunculus by name.
Yeah, and the daddy of the toxic
toxicology.
You know, toxicology. This guy is very important, and I'm just making jokes, you know.
So the homunculus to Paracelsus was the pinnacle of man's creative power. The idea that man could become a god, how I had mentioned earlier, essentially a demiurge. In 1572, physician Adam von Bodenstein, he published a book that was supposedly by Paracelsus, De Natura Rerum. And this is a very famous book. And in this book, there's an argument that things are either created by means of nature without art or with the aid of art, which is alchemy. And Paracelsus is the one that brought forth the idea of the egg. This phlegm, I'm not going to try and say the other words, like this mucous membrane, the phlegm that's inside the egg, right? That would putrefy, and that would bring forth the baby chick. We know that's wrong now, but this is what these guys thought. He was the one that came up with that idea. And he also stated that if you were to burn that bird or chick into a powder and insert its ashes into the phlegm and put that into a horse womb or subject it to the warmth of a quote unquote horse womb, you would get a quote unquote renovated and restored bird. So homeboy is got it kind of mixed up. You know, I have that book, The Devil's Doctor, the one that you just passed. So he's talking about how if you take that bird and you burn it and you put it back into the egg, that you're going to get some sort of a phoenix, which we know is wrong too. The Nature de Natura Rerum, he goes on to say that the death and rebirth of birds is quote unquote the highest and greatest Magnolian mystery of God, the highest secret and wonder work. It goes on to say, quote unquote, you must also know that men too may be born without natural fathers and mothers. That is, they are born from the female body in natural fashion as other children are born. But a man may be born and raised by means of art and by the skill of an experienced spadraist, as in show hereafter. This is him introducing the homunculus. He also talks about the unnatural union of man with beast, which also produces offspring, though not without heresy, because we know bestiality is a thing. Nowadays, there's people who like to have sex with animals. We know back then it was a thing. The Nephilim were doing it. The Nephilim were inserting themselves into animals. And
Have you seen the movie
Zoo?
The Death of Dick Long?
Have you seen Zoo?
No, but there's a movie called The Death of Dick Long.
Well, that's the same thing where the dude dies because he got perforated by the horse. Yeah. Yeah. So there's people who do this stuff. Okay, this is taboo, but there's a reason why it's taboo, right? And he dubbed these things monsters, Paracelsian monsters. An example of a Paracelsian monster, before we get to the actual homunculus, is the creation of a basilisk. If you've never heard of a basilisk, it's a mythological creature, almost like a dragon.
Have you heard of this headless man?
Yeah, in Lemuria or something like that.
I just saw like people posting it a lot. I didn't know if this is connected to any of that because it's in a bunch.
Could be. Well, so Paracelsus believed that giants of back then were spreading their seed all throughout the world, and wherever that seed would land would form a giant or a monstrosity of some sort. So he did believe that at one point in time. He would talk about it in his writings. He talked about the dualistic nature of sperm, how when man is in lust and this bestial nature comes out in man, that pollutes the sperm. And whenever that sperm is put into a woman, that's actually a soulless being. Well, this is Paracelsus talking. This is the daddy of all of that. The guy who came up with all these ideas talking about how you could pollute your sperm. And it just makes me think of NPCs, where these soulless sperm, like, are they the NPCs that we see who are just here for texture? You know, like some weird I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean, but
my friend works at the mall, and she says that in the morning, she's not into conspiracies or anything. She's explaining an NPC. She's like, these people, I don't think are real. Not that they don't have feelings and live, but they're like robots. They're like NPCs that are just programmed walking. And I'm like, you should go up to them and be like, hey, and just see what happens.
Yeah, I did a whole episode on NPCs on my channel where I got into the whole thing, and
I want to show people your channel real quick, just while you're on that on video screen, how you got some amazing podcasts. I'm on the most recent one, Illuminati Confirm, and we go into a little bit of the homunculi, but nothing like this. Oh yeah, here's the NPC one with Plato's Cave. Oh, that's going to be great. I'm listening to that tonight. But I mean, you got a ton of work done, and you do your research. So everybody, I'll have all the links down below for everyone to subscribe.
Yeah, I appreciate that, bro. Yeah, you can find anywhere you can find your podcast. I got a YouTube channel too. I post a video version of it on there. I'm trying to be like you, bro. So yeah, but I love doing deep dives and just learning and bringing new ideas to the game and about different topics from as scholarly as I can get. I consider myself a scholar. I consider myself a sage that's looking for the wisdom. And I like to back my ideas up with research. I like to say crazy things, and I like it better when I can back it up with even more. The truth is stranger than fiction.
Bro, we're on the same page, bro.
So
I'm so grateful for you, bro, coming on here and diving deep.
Sure.
And dude, this has been awesome. But continue.
The basilisk, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a mythological creature that you can't look at it or else it kills you. It's almost like a serpent dragon. You could relate it to Medusa, right, where she turns everything to stone. So Paracelsus talked about how to make one of these things, and this is where it gets a little bit misogynist. And he talks about the creation of the basilisk from the menstrual blood of a woman that's sealed up in a flask and heated to the temperature of a horse's womb. So what he would do is he would put this in a jar and he would stick it in horse poop because it was warm, right? Fresh horse that you would put in there, so it would cook it up and putrefy. Now, the basilisk is considered the monster, and these are his words, the monster above all monsters, because its glance can kill, just like the glance of a menstruating woman who, quote, who has also hidden poison in her eyes and can ruin mirrors with her gaze, make wounds impossible to hear, and spoil wine with her breath. The basilisk was the embodiment of the woman's impurities and their poisonous essence. These are his words. Misogynist, didn't like sex, right? Maybe he couldn't get some, bro. Who knows? He hated women. And we see this in his work. The basilisk, this thing that you can't look at. It's horrible. It's made from menstrual blood. After explaining how to create the basilisk, he describes the homunculus, how to create the homunculus. And he describes it in detail, which is essentially the masculine opposite of a basilisk. So it's this enlightened man, this higher being, this thing it's a more of a spiritual thing for him. That's why I go back to the whole idea of, are they talking in green language, or are they actually talking about something that's real? We must now by no means forget the generation of homunculi. And these are his words. And this is the first time that the word homunculus comes into literature, the first time we see it. For there is something to it, although it has been kept in great secrecy and kept hidden up to now. And there was not a little doubt and question among the old philosophers whether it can even be possible to nature and art that a man can be born outside the female body and without a natural mother. I give this answer, that is by no means opposed to the spagyric art and to nature, but that is indeed possible. But how this should happen and proceed, its process is thus, that the sperm of a man is putrefied by itself in a cucurbit for 40 days with the highest degree of putrefaction in a horse's womb, or at least so long that it comes to life and moves itself and stirs, which is easily observed. After this time, it will look somewhat like a man, but transparent without a body. If after this it is fed wisely with the acronym of human blood, and be nourished for up to 40 weeks, and be kept in an even heat of the horse's womb, a living human child grows therefrom, with all its members like another child, which is born of woman, but much smaller. So we have the first mention of homunculus by Paracelsus himself. Homunculi are magical. And the homunculus is pure because it hasn't been tainted by the quote-unquote poisonous mixture, how the basilisk was, the menstrual blood, the woman's essence. The homunculus, according to Paracelsus, that reaches adulthood is said to become a marvelous being like a giant or a dwarf. So maybe this is how we get mythological beings. They have supernatural strength, and they know all things hidden and secret things. And why is that? Why does this homunculus, this little being, know everything? It's a fortune teller. You can use its body for magical purposes. They received, and this is quote, they received their life from art. Through art, which is alchemy, they received their body, flesh, bone, and blood. Through art, they are born, and therefore art is embodied and inborn in them, and they need to learn it from no one. So this idea, again, this philosophical idea that this homunculus is art embodied. So it therefore knows everything about the world of forms. It goes back to this Platonic thought, this demiurgic thought, where it goes back to Aristotle all the way to the beginning of that time. And it's here in the 16th century by Paracelsus that was the one that really made it the most famous. He writes about this in the De Homunculus, which is another book that he wrote, where he states that man has what I was telling you, this dualistic nature to him, and the tainting of the sperm and all this stuff. And this to him was some sort of experience. It was the pinnacle of being able to create life. You have other people who talk about, well, it's actually the opposite, because man is only able to do what? To reproduce artificial versions of a real thing. Wouldn't it be the opposite of the highest pinnacle? Wouldn't it be the bottom of the barrel, because you're just creating a knockoff version of a human life, right? Essentially. So you have those two schools of thought when it comes to the idea of the homunculus. And I wanted to relate this to occultists of today. They're reading these same things, DoeNut. They're looking at the same grimoires. They're looking at all the same information, and they're taking it and they're putting it a step above. They're adding their own magical experiments, their own magical systems like Parsons and Enochian magic. They're stepping their game up. The idea is to manifest as quickly as you can with the least amount of work. The Jewish golem is related to Jack Parsons. Parsons, his mentor at the JPL, was supposedly a descendant of Rabbi Judai Low, the original guy who made the golem in Prague. This guy would brag about it, about how he was related in the same lineage of this guy. And we know that Parsons was doing sex magic in the desert with L. Ron Hubbard, and they were trying to bring forth what I would consider a homunculus. The same thing in the story of Aleister Crowley and the Moonchild, this magical child. The idea of sex magic and all that stuff, I'm sure you've gone into it, but they are able to infuse powers, archetypes, energies into this baby. We see these movies all the time where, oh, it's the son of the Antichrist, Rosemary's Baby. What was all that about? It was a movie about so the guy was also allegedly raping a woman too, right? Like they wanted to imprison him for doing what he was telling a story about. You know what I mean? So these guys infuse fiction with reality all at the same time. And I think that's the revelation of method that they use, where they put it out as it's a story. It's a story, right? It's a movie. It's great. It looks awesome. And in actuality, they're doing this behind closed doors. They're doing these same exact things that we're reading about. And if they're able to do this gruesome stuff to an animal, like how they do in the Liber Vitae, what wouldn't they do to a person? And it just makes me think of, what if that cow was actually from another ritual that magician had done, and turned the person into a cow, and is just using that cow for the new ritual? Because it tells you how to turn somebody into a monkey or a sheep or a cow. If you take the homunculus and you do what... The idea that pigs are maybe humans, right? There's that conspiracy too, where pigs are actually cloned humans, right? We have
Most
a bunch of
butchers don't eat pig.
Exactly. We have the idea that the religious belief that they don't eat pigs, but we have people who go missing all the time. Did the missing 411? Are they actually going into Hollow Earth? Are they actually being abducted?
Are they being turned into
in order for us to
or
cannibalize them? Yeah, exactly, bro.
Right,
So
right.
this goes,
and then you got all the
way deep.
cow mutilations too. I mean, I just putting that together, right? I mean, that's happening like a month ago. There was
The
a bunch of
skinwalker,
cows.
the skinwalker, the Watigo, the Watiko, and all these things are considered. You can consider them homunculus, because a skinwalker, there's a ritual that goes behind becoming a skinwalker. There's a ritual that goes behind becoming a Watiko. You have to do a ritual of killing one of your own, or invoking the skinwalker is more of a thought form, but even that could still be considered a homunculus of some sort.
And Jack Parson was killed when he was doing some lab experiment. Maybe that was for him to turn into like a skinwalker or something like that. I didn't know that about skinwalkers.
There was the conspiracy is that he blew himself up. The mainstream is he blew himself up handling explosives. Now there's some inconsistencies there because the blast came from underground and it folded the floorboards up. Some people say that he was messing with a fire elemental. Some people say that he was making a homunculus and he exploded himself. And the idea comes from when he was doing the sex magic with L. Ron Hubbard, where he's trying to invoke the Whore of Babylon. Allegedly, when Marjorie Cameron came, she was pregnant, and she was supposedly they used that. She aborted it, and they used that fetus and gave it to the government, and the government took that and did whatever they were doing with it. They were seeing if it was magical or not because it was made under magical circumstances, under a sex ritual magic. They had sex for like 2 weeks or something like that. And also the connection of the Trinity site, where allegedly in the big gumbo or whatever the name of that big capsule was, within that they were trying to make a homunculus through radioactivity. When they blew it up, they wanted to see if it would affect whatever it was in there. And that's by Michael Hoffman. He talked about that in his book. Wow. I'm not able to confirm that information.
But also, like, it just makes sense because the atomic bomb was created and they wrote a book about it and they called it American Prometheus, and it was this guy Oppenheimer. Really? Yeah, so and it's a movie that's coming out like this month, and we're hearing about all this nuclear stuff, but it's called Oppenheimer. They wrote a book about it, and it was called American Prometheus. So like, yeah, so like,
well, there's the creepy video of him. One of my favorite quotes by him, where they look him in the eyes, and Oppenheimer's like, I have now, he quotes the Mahabharata where he goes, I have now become the destroyer of worlds. And you see that symbolism where either Vishnu becomes the full, the multi-armed form. You see that in CERN, bro, with the Shiva in front of CERN. And Kali is the opposite of that. And I relate that to Marjorie Cameron had a cult where they were trying to make an interracial star child, an interracial homunculus, and they thought they were bringing forth this new era of people. Aleister Crowley, I'm sure he was doing that too. So all the greatest occultists that of all time probably were messing with this, and they were doing these same things, and they were stepping it up at a higher level. And we see stories again all throughout how you looked up in the media with the movies about homunculus and the mangas infusing this idea, the Frankenstein being also some sort of a homunculus, and all these ideas.
Statues coming to life are also could be considered homunculus, I'm sure, because there's ancient stories how statues started coming to life.
Funny you mentioned this. This is a very esoteric book by one of my favorite authors, Artificial Humans from Pygmalion to the Present, Falling in Love with Statues, and it's by George L. Hersey. And he talks about just that. It's the entire history of the mythology of falling in love with an artificial human. So it talks about homunculus in here. I cited some of my information from here too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to buy this. It's not available.
That's dope.
Yeah, essentially that is the history of the alchemical homunculus. That was a crash course in Aristotelian biology, the early figures that talked about the homunculus. And there's a bunch of stories, and I want to, if I can plug something, I'm gonna have something coming up, an upcoming project. My first zine that I have that I'm going to be publishing very soon is going to be on this exact topic, a whole breakdown with pictures, longer quotes, because I condensed some of the quotes because they're very long, and source material, bibliography of where I got my information. So the zine is going to be hopefully a community project. I would love for you to be a part of it. I want to source different channels to write articles in here. The Occultus Mundi, The Hidden World, and this is issue number 1. It's going to be out on the homunculus. It's going to be 24 pages of just straight homunculus talk and the whole history of it. And yeah, hopefully by the time this episode's out, I'll be done with it. This is a rough.
Yeah, bro. I'll order a bunch of them and I sell them.
I'll send you some, bro. Don't worry about that. But yeah, that's what I got, man. And I really like talking about these weird subjects that not a lot of people talk about. You know, a lot of
Bro, this is
people.
the first time I heard about this. I've been very, very interested in learning about this topic, and I'm just so grateful that you laid it out so well. I don't think there's anything like this on the internet right now. So I'm excited for this to be out there because this information that you brought is just mind blowing. The truth is stranger than fiction. So
That's right.
where can everybody find you?
At the Hole in One Podcast on all social media platforms. Instagram being my main one. I have a YouTube channel, rockfin.com/the One on One Podcast. I do have a Patreon as well, patreon.com/the One on One Podcast. And literally anywhere you can find the podcast, Juan Ayala. And I cover conspiracies. I talk about religion. I do deep dives. I got the Occult Book Club with Paranoid American, where we cover books like this in detail. We do the dirty work for you, so you don't have to sit and read about dog dicks, right? And dog dick lifesavers, you know what I mean? Like just fighting, magicians fighting with dog dick. We do all that for you, and we bring. I did a really deep dive on werewolves, bro. You would think it's like, oh, werewolf, a cryptid? Nah, bro. Werewolves go so deep, and it's tied into all of this stuff because it's, again, I did a 3-hour episode on that. Check that out. It's on my channel as well. And yeah, anywhere, Juan Podcast. Find me on there, bro.
You gotta be. You can't be a werewolf. You gotta be a werewolf. You gotta be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I got all the links down below. Much love, bro.